Good evening. Today is Tuesday, April 13th. This is the regular meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. Can I have an approval of a motion to approve the minutes of the March 23rd, 2021 regular meeting?
So moved.
Any additional corrections? All those in favor? That passes. And report from our superintendent.
Okay, I did prepare some slides just to kind of guide through this. I'm going to talk mostly about our plans to return 2.0, so our getting back to bringing more students in person. And I'm going to do that by talking about the mitigation measures. I'm also going to discuss guidance and how decisions are made with all of the guidance that's been happening. Because I know since we've last met, there's been CDC guidance, there's been Dutchess County guidance, there's been state guidance, and it's sometimes confusing to understand what our obligations are, so I will kind of guide us through all of that. So every week, all superintendents in the county meet with the Department of Health and the county executive's office. That's a very important meeting because those decisions are all the local decisions, and that's where we are able to plan and get consent from our local authorities. So our plan to return more middle and high school students into the building was reviewed by the Commissioner of Health as well as the Director of Communicable Diseases. So they reviewed and approved the plan based on the mitigation factors that I'm going to review tonight. We are still able to proceed with those plans regardless of the guidance that came out recently, which informs local health departments that consult with local school districts. The one piece that they encouraged us to do is to make sure that we discuss publicly what those plans are. And I know there was recently emails coming from middle school and high school principals to families about where they're at, and they listed some of these mitigation efforts. This meeting tonight is another way of connecting with the public about what our plans are. So we have to make sure that we're explaining all of it. But everything that we are doing has been given the gold seal of approval by our local health authorities. Okay. So you're going to see there's a lot of maintenance of most of the protocols. These are the kind of this is what we've been doing, and they're the most important. The one thing is the correct use of masks and some education around that. There has to be at least some attention to supervising that masks are being worn correctly. We have to make sure that we go out of our way to do that. I will tell you that every single student who approaches the building, everybody gets out of their car. It's consistent. The kids have been amazing about that since the very, very beginning. And I think that actually the cooperation of our community and of our students and of our faculty and staff has been why we've been able to continue with minimal interruptions or kind of stops and starts like many of our other neighbors. The others are the basics that we've been doing. So here's where it starts to change. We have to maximize physical distancing. And in many of our classrooms, the distancing is still 6 feet in all directions, depending on the number of desks required in that room based on the schedule and the size of the room. In some other rooms, the distancing will be put into a 4x4. So if you see in this room here, there's X's on the ground. That is at 6 feet in all direction. So part of this returning to students is having someone go in the room, and all credit to Mark Berg, who's really been doing a fantastic job, going into every single room and remarking those rooms based on the numbers of students who are scheduled into those classrooms. It is a very precise task because the desks that we're sitting at here, for example, come from the middle school, from 7th and 8th grade rooms, and it's 2 students per table, which obviously we can't do because that's 6 inches of social distancing, let alone multiple feet. So in a classroom that has 12, 13, or 14 of these tables, we now have to move those tables out, replace them with individual desks, which we have a limited number of. So they're really doing, he equates it to a Jenga, kind of moving all the parts around to make it possible. But he personally is going into those spaces along with our custodial staff to make it ready. But we are maximizing the distancing, so it's not 4 feet. In many cases, it's 4 feet and then 5 feet in another direction. So we're making the most of every single space. It's all customized to make sure it's the most distance. I do want to point out, and because I know it's been a topic, our plan has always incorporated a robust remote process, dedicated remote time. We have since incorporated the live streaming as a component to that, but we have had dedicated remote periods in both the elementary school as well as the high school time to that. And that has been an important part for those families who opted for that, to give them an equal or quality experience for remote. The health department was very glad to see that at the secondary level, we don't have any unsupervised, unstructured time without masks like the lunch periods, because it is an additional risk factor for any transmission in school. So that was a plus when they reviewed our plan. It is also particularly interesting because both the CDC guidance and the New York State guidance talked about lunches and how lunches, you have to maintain the distance in lunch spaces. So that is one of those those shifts that some school districts that have made other reopening plans have to adjust. Ours will not have to be adjusted based on the revised guidance. The classroom windows and doors will be open to increase air exchange. You know, we're in a room now, the windows are open. You can feel there's a little bit better quality of experience. And all of the unit ventilators, the univent systems in all classrooms have been inspected to monitor the functioning of that and opening each of them to have the maximum air intake. So we have maximum exchange there. Daily cleaning and disinfection of all surfaces. So our custodial and our cleaners, they actually clean every one of the desks, but the students still also have placemats that come onto the desk as well. This is also a change, assigning seats. So the first guidance was having directional flow into classrooms, so students would, the first one would go to the furthest seat and, you know, all of that. Now the guidance has changed to be assigned seating so that when we do contact tracing, we know who is where. So every classroom has to have assigned seats, which is also good for any individual student who has preferential seating as part of a CSE recommendation. We're also able to accommodate that better as well. So it has actually been a win-win. And then the implementation of surveillance testing that will start next Monday. I met with members of the nursing staff to make that happen. You know, we're going to start small with that. We're going to start with our older students first, the students who are most likely to be interacting with others in the social setting, those who are driving. You know, we're going to be doing that. We have to keep it relatively random, but it will all be consent driven. So there'll be an email coming home to families starting with 12th and 11th grade families seeking their consent to participate in surveillance testing. And I can answer any questions that you might have about that. So this is just when the guidance comes. I mean, it's every Friday. There's a big reveal. It's usually around Friday at like 3, 4, or 5 o'clock about some of the new guidance on there. So this is just, you know, in the past month of what all superintendents have been dealing with. But all of them say that we have to work with our local departments of health and to use the most precise data. This is very important because there's a lot of talk about red zones and all the zones. And if you look at by the county statistics, you will see the transmission rate classifies us in the CDC red zone. However, if you look at our district rate or you look at the school data, which we do collect data of all positive cases, and, you know, knock on any wood that you have, we have had no positive cases in the past 4 weeks, maybe a little bit longer than that. So that is actually viable data to be used for assessing the level and allowing us to continue to operate. So the local health department is more precise with the data, and we're expected to use the most precise data available, including our own school data, in making our decision. Okay, I put that out there because I know if you read the guidance, there's some cause for alarm. There are parts of our county who have higher rates in certain regions of them, but we are able to continue with our plan as established. So the guidance establishes the framework, but we make the decisions locally and we do it as thoughtfully as possible. Throughout this whole entire school year, we've tried to be very thoughtful and purposeful and make decisions that we knew would be able to work versus just, you know, trying things. We've been trying to be very thoughtful and purposeful. Any little thread you pull has a lot of tentacles when it comes to this because there's so much shifting around, and we're trying to do it with the least amount of disruption as possible. I know that there's a strong feeling that we wish it could just be a flip of a switch and just make it all go back to how it was, but it's not that simple when it comes to that. But you know, all credit, we have amazing people here making it possible, and I'll kind of update us where we're at. This you already know. The one thing I want to point out is we've had only 2 temporary shifts to remote, so we had a relatively, you know, seamless process, particularly at the K-5. It is a modified schedule. But there are many districts who are just now moving their K-5 students back in. And now we have currently 7, 11, 12, and all CSE students attending on the 4 days a week with a modified schedule. And an additional 5th day for some students. They come in on Wednesdays for supervised study hall. And the rooms are the final setup should take place on Wednesdays. Wednesdays are when we do most of the moving. If you look into the cafeteria here, you'll see there are large tables where there used to be single desks, so there's been a lot of moving. So we're all on schedule for that, and then they're going to move on to the 9th and 10th at the second half of the week. So it's sometimes hard to say exactly when. We didn't notify juniors, for example, until I think Thursday or Friday, because it's when it was ready. So, you know, we could be completely ready with all on the 19th. We may need to delay that till the following Thursday, which would be like the 21st or 22nd. But we're trying to still target that 19th for all. I already have been told we are going to be ready for sure. We already know that by now, the 6th and 8th. We just have to continue to check every single room based on the roster, the desks, but we're really pushing to make sure we meet our established deadline and our goal. And I'm pretty confident, if not exactly, it will be within, you know, one half of one cohort session within that week. And then this is the budget. So I'll stop there to talk about the mitigation and reopening, and then I'll come back to this. Is there any? I'll stop there because there's been a lot.
Any questions?
I know you had addressed it earlier, but I'm wondering for our parents at home if you could just address the use of outdoor space as we get into the warmer months.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for reminding me. We have, I think, a total of 6 tents that will be coming, 2 large, both on this campus and at CLS, as well as some pop-up ones in the front of the building as well. And we also have chairs that'll be used for mostly meal service. Many of the teachers rely on the technology in the classroom, both for the streaming and just for the presentation of material. We did have some teachers who do go outside if they're doing like literature circles or some elements of that, but many of them are so tied to their classroom technology that has been. But we do have tents available for use, and I know there was a very high demand at CLS to have the kids outside, and Brett and Fern have a schedule, so the teachers will be able to use that as well. But we've already procured the tents, and they're going to be installed Friday.
Tomorrow. Nope, they're actually, they decided to do it tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Great.
They
Even
have
better.
time in their schedule, they're doing it tomorrow.
Even better.
Great, thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about what plans might be in place for if students in the middle and high school are participating in sports? After school, there's a gap of some time. Will families be able to, will students be able to stay and maybe have a space?
That's a great. I'll make a note and I'll bring that up with the principals. I think that's a really interesting question because the number of students we have that are athletes.
Right,
yeah.
to be able to
I will,
have a place to eat lunch outside and do their homework before practice rather than having to be picked up and brought back.
Right. Yeah, I will. I'll bring that up with the principal.
Thanks.
Can you talk a little bit more about, in detail about the survey, the testing, how that works?
Yeah. So the surveillance testing will be. It's a supervised self-swab. So we will have a nurse who. We are actually going to have focus on the high school age students first, so they're able to do the administration under supervision, and it will provide a result within 15 minutes. But that result is a surveillance result. It is not a medical exam. We are not providing a test. So this testing is not used if a family has a symptomatic child. They can't call up the school and say, "Hey, could you give me a COVID test?" It's not meant to be that, and the type of test that it is meant more for like surveillance purposes. If we were to get a positive, then that student would then go into isolation. It would not trigger contact tracing and the such until they get a confirmed test under medical supervision. Because again, it's not a medical exam. We are just providing it as a surveillance, which is more of an assessment for the school to pick up on any asymptomatic transmission or elements like that. But it would be done. I think we're focusing on both before school and at the end of the day around that noon time. It will all be scheduled. So once we have a consent list, it will not be a surprise. It will be scheduled, and both the student and the family will know when they're scheduled for that surveillance testing. So it will be communication in advance.
And I guess the question would be, could families opt to not participate in
Yeah,
that?
it's only going to be consent. They have to provide active consent to be included in it.
Are adults a part of this pool?
So the recommendation is that we do not do any surveillance testing on vaccinated adults.
That was kind of my question
So,
there.
you know, we have a very high percentage of vaccinated adults. So that will be, they're not in our current plan. Right now, our plan is for, I'll actually talk about vaccination level for students, but it's really focusing on the students.
I think that's kind of one of the reasons why our rates are going higher, and you see it in the state's starting to go higher, you see it. Not more people are testing positive, there's fewer people getting tested
Well, I
now
will
because
s-
you've been vaccinated.
In the
Unless
past,
you got symptoms, you're not being
the
tested.
past 2 days, if you look at the state data for Dutchess County, yesterday's data, 78 new cases, which is the lowest it's been in a long time, because it's been about over 100, 130, 140. Today was 61, but there were only about 1,300 tests, which we've been getting 3,000 tests, and so it is all percentages. But what you should start to see, starting with tomorrow, you'll start to see the active case number start to come down, which will be better. You know, the health department constantly talks about the severity index. They look at the hospitalization. It is true there tend to be a general increase in younger people with positive test results, but that's also because of the vaccination status as well. I mean, just to come off of testing, and I thought I had a slide around there, but I could just tell everyone. This is just, I think, just good information for families to know that this 16 and 17-year-olds are only eligible for Pfizer. And the way that the allotment has done is Ulster County has the predominant allocation of Pfizer doses. So you'll probably see lots of links being shared for families to go to Ulster. That is not because Dutchess isn't doing it, they just the current allotment. But the county is working with us to establish school-based student vaccination clinics. So they would come, Janet and I have already talked, we agreed to be together. So we find a central location for Red Hook and Rhinebeck students that we offer to the county, say we'll partner so you can get 2 districts in one day, and they'll come and do a clinic. And I just put this note here that we had most of our vaccinations was coordination through the county. So they do follow through. It's again not always as fast as we want it, but they're committed to schools. They've been really focused on getting us, back, getting us what we need. So I'm really hopeful that they're going to be able to find an opportunity to bring for our community vaccination for the kids, which is going to be a game changer in a lot of ways as we head into the summer and fall.
Are we tracking at all, how many of our 16 and 17 and 18-year-old students have already been vaccinated?
Yeah, so
first?
that is going to be part of the consent for testing because we don't want to test vaccinated students. We're also asking for families to tell us about their vaccination status because it also impacts contact tracing. So we need to know for a number of reasons. And based on, because it is a vaccination, we actually have access to those records. The school nurses can actually access that. We prefer that the families just tell us, it's easier so that we can code it into school tool. But we do have access to, that is not protected health information because it is vaccination related. So schools do have access to that data. But we are going to be seeking for knowledge of that so that as we start to, if in the event we have to do any contact tracing, we need to know because those students would not necessarily be part of that.
So how about the students that have already received, let's say, 1 vaccination? Because I know a lot of the students work in food industry and they've started their vaccination process. So for those students, would you be testing them? Does the nurse already want to know?
We should
that-
not, so one of the things about the consent, and even after we get consent, because one thing we found is even when we get information from families, it sometimes changes. So before that test were to occur, we would verify that they had not begun. We don't want them in testing if they've begun the vaccination process.
Okay. And the testing is a nasal swab or an oral swab?
It's a nasal, it's a self-administered nasal
swab.
swab.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why, by the way, they're very effective as surveillance tools, but they also are not the most reliable of all. They're probably the least reliable approved rapid test. It is what they give for at-home testing, so what they mail home is what it is. You still have to have it. We are not going to act on that until it gets confirmed by a healthcare provider. It's more to provide an additional layer of protection for the school to say, look, we're taking a sampling of students so that if there was, to prevent any unintended asymptomatic spread. That's really what it is for. But I think, we're in really great shape, to be honest. I feel that we're really in a great place in terms of being ahead of this and not having to be reactive, but being thoughtful, and we have plans, and it's I'm just, given all that it could be, I think we're in a fantastic place.
Any other questions? Could I just ask you quick, because this came out, I think Friday also, the graduation requirements came out. So I know it might be a little early, but there's a lot of anxious parents around.
I'm optimistic.
graduation.
There's a stipulation, if you read the guidance very, very carefully, there is a chance, I think June 1st is another change of date. So like if you get to June 1st, I think we should all be very optimistic that we can have a great in-person ceremony, outdoors. Whether or not it would require proof of vaccination or testing is to be TBD. But I will tell you that if it does require testing, our rapid tests will be permissible for use, and we do have another shipment coming. So if we needed to have a clinic where we say, anybody who wants to come, come on this date, we'll get you a rapid test that would allow you to participate. Everybody wants it to happen at the government level, so they're working with us to get access to it. They're not going to say, if you have a negative test, you can come, and then not give us access to testing. So I think there'll be some coordination there, but we should be hopeful for those end of year things, not only for the high school graduation, but also for the moving up. All of those end of year festivities. I think we should be very optimistic. The biggest thing is the Footloose complex, which is, can the kids dance? That's the biggest question, because they're still saying that they want table-based squares carved out on the dance floor, that only the people at your table are the only people you can dance with. That's still part of the real guy. It's literally Footloose. They cannot dance.
Dancing, who dances?
So there could be a prom with no dancing.
I just think that there'll be a rebellion. It's going to be like, you can't tell a kid they can't dance. They will find a way
Well, you
that
can
they
dance,
will.
but by yourself in your square.
There will be a flash. There'll be a flash mob.
Okay. Well, we're moving in the right direction.
So and my last, just an update, and Tom is going to present on this, but I wanted to just show the board just statistically where we're at relative to the tax levy limit. I know there'll be some discussion from the minutes from strategic planning as well as the presentation from Tom. So this is how it looks from a percentage standpoint, and I wanted to just kind of show that up there, because when you look at this from a historical context, this is the furthest we've been below the levy limit, and at least as far back as I could look. So I wanted to point that out there because I think it's very important to recognize that, as well as the change in the tax-based growth factor, which is much higher, which is good in terms of the impact on the taxpayer. And then also from a budget to budget, I think this is very important. If you look at this, that's a significant shift from budget to budget. It represents a 2.21 decrease from budget to budget. Now, some of that number is related to the removal of federal aid out of our revenue side, which Tom will talk more about. But that's we are able to do this, present a responsible budget plan while maintaining the programs, which I think is essential to all of that. So I put those two slides together. I'll continue to give more. I know I put some information in the backup just to help understand all of that, but it's an interesting phenomenon to see the budget to budget number, and then also understanding that how it relates to the tax levy limit. So I'll continue to just provide more of that data, and Tom will give more context today about what's happening with the aid side, especially with the federal aid, which are those single one-time little boosts that districts are getting, and how we're planning for the use of those as well. And just making sure, I think that's, sorry for the longer report. And yeah, I think everything else that I was going to update on is covered in other minutes.
Okay. You provided us with in the back of our packet, the information about understanding school tax bill. I'm wondering if that's going to be on our website for families, because
We're
it's
going
a
to do something.
great
We discussed
document.
about it, either giving us examples from our community putting
Yeah.
our community's information into there.
Because it's very easy to understand. It'd be great for our community to be able to understand your tax bill a little bit. That's what the title of it is.
I will tell you, as a homeowner, I thought it was very interesting to understand equalization rates, and especially in a district that serves 6 towns. It's very important to understand the equalization rate and what it means and how assessments play into that. And it's particularly of interest, I think, for all of us, just to educate homeowners in our district about the reassessment and the impact of that as it relates to the town. So I think this, if this is helpful, I think we can get that on the website.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, we have an opportunity now for public comment. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our reports and discussion. The first one is strategic planning committee.
That's me. So ordinarily lately, I wouldn't be reading out the discussion part, and I would just sort of jump to the full board input. But should I go ahead since there's some meaty stuff there?
I think it's
Or-
summarizing the discussion. Yeah.
Summarize it, okay. So we talked about 2 major topics. The first one was the fall reopening plan, and Albert shared with us broad concepts, not down to the granular detail level, but broad concepts about how he envisions the model of delivery instruction in fall, which would be all 3 schools, full days, every day with in-person instruction. And that we would have we would participate with other districts in our county in a Boces program to provide remote schooling. So we would not be providing a local in-district remote schooling option. There would be an application process for individuals with ADA-defined medical needs to attend the remote schooling program through Boces. And that there would also be minimum duration of absence before a student could attend the Boces remote program. So this is definitely different from this year. And the part that we're looking for full board input on is the committee supports this proposed approach and is requesting feedback from the full board about whether you support moving forward with the Boces remote model. So, people
Why
want
don't
to
we make sure we have feedback on that topic before we move
Yeah,
on?
before we move on. People have questions about it, or what your
Question, or
thoughts?
if we just get a sense of if you're in supportive of that model.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea, because it will localize everything, and we'll all have they'll have a place to go. So you're still providing it, but not necessarily putting the burden on our staff here. So I think that would be a great option. I support it.
Sounds like it'll increase the quality of the in-person by kind of outsourcing some of the remote needs.
I have 2 questions. First of all, we don't even know whether or not remote teaching is going to be mandated by the state like they did last year. So this would be in case somebody had a medical condition that they couldn't attend in person?
Right, so
What's
one of the way that it was advised to us is that this is related to an executive order, the way that we're operating now to.
Correct, yeah.
And that upon that expiring, that there would be an expectation to return to pre-COVID, educational law requiring attendance in person. And that if we were encouraged to provide remote, that it would be something that we do, but we can define the terms of that. And so what I am putting out as a vision for how we are planning, and just for communication, so that the families are aware of kind of where we're at, is that we believe that schools are safe. We believe that we can put in practices that are safe, and that we can follow all of those measures, that the health department has advised us of such. Because with the revised guidance that we're operating on right now, we're close to, we could do it. If we had the time to reset and by the fall, we'll be able to operate in a way that is safe. So if a family had a reason that would be a qualifying disability under ADA, we would work with any individual family to provide them with education. It would be through an agreement, collaboration with Boces, with other districts. So there may be, a number of students in, say, a grade level here that would need remote, then they would combine with the students from other districts. The key word is the need versus the wish. So it's about why this is an important conversation, is it's taking out the option. It's not opting for. It's not providing a menu of it. And the reason that I think it is an important, the reason it's a recommendation, and obviously it's the board's, this is what we're really looking for input on, is that for the school to function, we have to have that solidarity around the in-person experience, so that the teachers aren't, feeling that the both. There are certain tools that we've learned, that we've incorporated, that have been very effective. I think there's been some really creative streaming and other uses of technology that I think are good tools, but they should be in support or supplementing the in-person experience, not replacing it. That's where my recommendation is rooted in, is that I greatly would never want a family to feel that it's an unsafe. So if with the consultation of the medical provider, it's not safe, then we will be providing access to quality experience that is credit bearing, that will lead them to their pathway, but it'll just be not situated here. That's why it's a big decision, but we need to have that touch point for planning purposes moving forward, and that's really what we're seeking input on.
And I think to Tom's point, like if we were mandated by the state to provide remote instruction, we would still be looking to provide it this way.
That is my recommendation. And this does come at a cost, just to be clear, it does come at a cost. This does tie into the conversation about federal aid. If it is COVID related, providing of instruction, there is federal aid for that. It does come at a cost, though.
Again, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I think it would take a burden off our teachers trying to serve both models, which is very difficult to do. And they could really focus on the quality of the in-person, and utilize Boces to provide services for people who had a medical need for the remote.
I just wanted to add, since you alluded to that, and I left it unspoken, but to articulate that it would not be Rhinebeck teachers providing, it would be Boces teachers providing those services.
I support this model, and we should move forward with that plan.
These aren't online courses type, there's going to be a teacher there. It's not like EduSeer or some of, you see on TV. That is not what they're planning to do. This would be an actual teacher.
I don't know about their model.
Oh,
I very well may be EduSeer.
Oh, it might. Oh, that's totally different.
I think it is actually.
I could do that easily then. We could do that ourselves.
What we're really looking for, so that we have basically a path to plan. There will be a much more formal, thorough presentation about that, resumption of. But I want to make sure that we have a discussion about it, so that we have direction, just to understand that it's the path forward. That's really what I think, that from a planning perspective, I think that's what the committee was really hoping to.
Yeah, I think in order to teach remote students well, you can't have full in-person. And so in order to move forward, I think this is the only way we can do that.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect time to do this, and I just would want this to be over-communicated, so there's no misunderstandings, and the community is aware and has enough time to make whatever decisions that they want to. But I think getting everybody back in the fall is great, and I think it's time.
Right. I think that's the most important, is just the communication. I think this is the first start of that. But I think there's a lot of anxiety about the unknown. And granted, guidance changed, guidance shifts, but I will say that I feel that there has been a lot of support in our county to having, this body, having local school boards make decisions that are right for the local school. And so I think that is, we just are able to make a vision and a plan. So what I will do is I will talk to the three principals and look to craft their third presentation around the future, around the vision, So that'll kind of be wrapped up into a presentation, their third kind of presentation, like summarizing, celebrating this year, and crafting out a vision forward. So to get more specific details about.
All right, so I'll continue. The second topic of discussion at the strategic planning meeting was the budget for next year. And the only thing I'll add to what Albert showed earlier is that we did explore a few scenarios and looked at the long-term fiscal impacts of different tax levy numbers. We played around with the numbers and, well, Tom played around and Christine played around with the numbers and we looked at them and talked about them. And so the committee supports this tax levy increase of 2.37%, which is below the tax levy cap. And we wanted to find out if the full board supports this number as well.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
I do as well.
Yeah, I support it.
Okay. All right, so that's the end of those minutes. So we're going to move on to our budget presentation.
All right, in front of you, you have 3 documents of what I hope to be the last and final version of this, as we'll be hopefully adopting later on. This should have been in front of you tonight. It should have been 3 documents. Starts with the budget development changes, then you have a third draft of revenues and a third draft of the entire budget. I really just want to concentrate on this first document, which are the changes, because I think I can explain all the changes through this one document. So the first page, forget all about that. That's where we left off at the end of our last budget meeting, which was on March 23rd. And at that time, we were $174,000 under the cap, okay? But things kind of changed in the meantime. So let's flip over to the next page. And we'll look at the first one, and I called it COVID-19 supplemental stimulus, because that's what it was called the first time it was out. And it was included up in the general fund at the time. So my understanding was, okay, this is a part of the state aid funds we're getting. But last week, more information came out, and it was determined, we actually got the information actually came out officially yesterday morning, that these funds need to be accounted for in the special aid fund, or the federal aid, sometimes it's called. That's where all our grants are accounted for. So the feds want to make sure that their money is put aside, put in the fund, and they get account for this, okay? So one of the things, to do that was $684,000 and some change there, that needed to come out of the budget. So what I did over the weekend was cull through the budget to say, what can we put into the federal grant that I know will get approved? It went through all the reasons and everything. So I wanted to kind of go through this list, which is fairly extensive. There's about 20 different lines of various things that I took out of this last budget and will be putting into the grant application. Now, we won't get the grant application, they said, until the end of April, so we can't go up there right now and input it. But we just got approval for the CARES Act, the last CARES Act, which is about $230,000. But this process is a lot easier. It's going to be a lot easier than the last one. So I just want to kind of go through these things as to why I pulled them out of the budget. So have fuel oil, reducing it by $39,000. And the reason is, we're opening up all these windows, things of that nature, airflow coming into it. We're using a lot more fuel oil than we ever anticipated. So this is for increased airflow, is costing us money. So this money is coming out, and this is one of those purposes. The unclassified expenses, remember we had that at $200,000? This year, the last rendition was at $50,000. We're coming back normal next year, so I'm taking the $50,000 out. Now those monies could be used towards remote learners or in some other cases, which would be applied through the grant process. BOCES services, reducing it by $55,000. This is in curriculum development. One of the things that we'll be doing is curriculum development. That we put 55 days in there for, what was the program? It was-
So this is for the elementary, to get us in full implementation of the TC program. And we are going to have this be eligible for the grant because we're tying it to assessment, so to the MAPS data. So as an intervention, one of the biggest focuses is on learning acceleration. So as opposed to this focus on like gaps or like what's missing, it's rethinking how instruction is delivered. So we will incorporate our shift to this curriculum with the work around addressing the learning needs of every individual student based on the MAPS testing. So we have assessment data on each individual student, so the curriculum work is going to be eligible for grant application because it's tied to that improvement for the individual.
The next line is for professional development. We had $60,000 in the budget. This professional development was really around getting ready for Canvas and getting everything online to do that, reducing that by $30,000. If we need those monies easily, this qualifies for applying through the grant. I also took the next set of ones here. Oh, no, sorry, the big one, grades 4 and 5. These are the two teachers, one at 4th grade and one at 5th grade. Nice one-time expenditures that will help in the years afterwards, but putting them into the grant, thereby reducing the number of kids in each class and to help along that line.
In the board packet, I provided some background information about what's eligible under these two acts. So this falls under the class size reduction to make it eligible.
So then right after there's enrichment, homework review, credit recovery, homework review, social skills programs. Took them all out of the budget. This grant is set up for exactly this purpose. And so we'll build a grant around providing those experiences to start this summer. That's one thing I like about this. This is going to be short-tracked, and we'll have this, should have this available to us by July 1st. Right below it, you see teacher salary. That's for the counselor at CLS, taking it completely out of the budget. But once again, to apply through this is a perfect example of what the feds are looking for, the social emotional well-being of our children. Oh, sorry about that. That was, sorry, before I get back to that, that was not that one. I'm sorry. That one is the summer, end of the year summer enrichment that we were looking for the last 2 weeks of the year. It's that, so that's what that is for. I'm sorry about that. As I look at the 2330, that is the summer program that we were looking to come back those last 2 weeks to get the kids ready to be prepared to start the year. Took out $70,000 worth of equipment for computers, which is another one that's great for the grant, and that's the 3rd grade, the new set of the 3rd grade, replacing the 3rd grade equipment there. The guidance, that's the one I wanted to talk about. Really, that's a counselor. That's what I was talking about at CLS. That was a .6 position in the new position in the budget, taking it out of the budget, but would put forward in through the grant process. The nurse, I reduced it. We hired a nurse this year, also having to do with buses. So I reduced the budget by basically 0.8. 0.2 for the bus, 0.8 extra help needed at the elementary level. But look to see that phased out over the next year or so. The transportation, that's the transportation in the summer for the summer enrichment program. So taking that out, another perfect purpose for this. And the last 4 are benefit codes for the retirement system, Social Security, health insurance, and union welfare benefits, and those all relate to the reduction of the teacher, the counselor, and the nurse.
Can I just summarize?
Yes.
So in summary, one thing that this almost was a little bit of a backwards process because we got information late to take that. In our initial state aid runs, this money was included as a revenue stream. So we developed the budget based on our initial state aid run. In that meantime, we were told to remove this And so none of this is being eliminated in terms of program offering, it's just being accounted for separately through this grant process. So that is, we could have developed the budget and then applied to this all separately. So that just came about because the shifting guidance, like all guidance this year has been shifting.
Right. And next year, when we go through the budget process, we are going to have to include that last big part, the American Recovery Plan, which is, and it's not all our money. We believe some of this money is going to be Astor's too. But we currently have $1.55 million that will be coming to us over the next couple of years. We have to work with that as we do this budget process for next year. We will have to really begin creating that grant for the following year, looking for one-time type of expenditures, because in the end, this money's going to run out, and we're not sure whether or not the state's going to have the money to backfill these gaps. Be interesting to find out. We'll have to see how the state finances look. It's looking a lot better lately as far as the reports coming out of Albany, as far as the sales tax and their actual revenues they're getting there. It's much better than they expected. They expected like a 20% loss of funds in that. It's nowhere near that. And the feds have helped out too by boosting them up. So those were the changes from the last one, which really gets us down to a budget of negative 2.21% with a tax levy of 2.37, but it's still $174,000 under the tax levy limit.
Do you have a sense, Tom, of this 684 number, what percent would be one-offs versus stuff that would come back to our budget in the following years?
Well, as I look at it, I think the area in which, as I look at it, because I'm looking multiple years, fuel oil, with all these new windows and everything we added here, we can absorb that loss. The unclassified expenses, yeah, that was, we never had a purpose for that. That's a one-timer. The Boces services, one-timer. Professional development, not a one-time thing, but 30,000, we had zero 2 years ago. It wasn't until last year that we actually put money in professional development. Because we also have curriculum writing too. So there's two parts to that.
Yeah, I think what's going to be interesting is that some elements of it, like a portion of it, may have a second life in that multi-year American Recovery Plan. So some of it will transition there. The difference about the American Recovery Plan is that that's going to have to sit within CDEP. There's got to be community engagement, and you have to kind of go through a little bit more like some of the other title grants. So I think that when you talk about some of the people, that's where you want to look at what the expansion may be over the multi-year. With starting this process fresh, I think it'll be a little cleaner to establish like here's the grant proposal and here's the vision for it. So in my mind, almost all of this has to this is a one-time, and so then only little elements of that are going to get moved into the next.
I mean, I think all this stuff is great. I would just hope with the next round of money coming in that we think more broadly about benefiting more kids, like in a way that's more fun for them to come back to school, give them something back instead of kind of this instructional based stuff. So I would just hope we kind of focus a little bit on that, on the bigger picture of what we can do to improve their.
Yeah, I think that the American Recovery Rescue, the American Rescue needs to be around vision and planning, not. This was really more of a reactive process, given the change in where the revenue came from. I think that's a really important project that we have like a set vision for, and not only just filling in. Particularly as it relates to the transition, because I will tell you, anecdotally, there are some students who now are just like, oh, there's a lot of kids in school, and it's not an easy transition. As excited as people are, it's the transition, and I think we can do some for all of the kids to fill in that emotional need. So, and I think we can actually still do some planning for that funding for this upcoming year.
Yeah.
We're going to be planning the American Rescue grant process independent of the budget. So those things can still happen independent of this process.
Yes.
Mark, did you have your hand up? Anybody else have any questions? I think it just maybe bears repeating one more time that, you know, 'cause I'm sure there are taxpayers that say, you know, why don't you just take that 1.5 million or that 600 and just reduce it from the tax levy? I just think it's worth repeating that there's kind of strings attached to that money and it has to be used in a very specific
Remember,
way.
it's supplement versus supplant.
Yes.
I know, and it's supplement, and that's the big number there. Supplement means more.
Right, so
Supplant
we can't
means
just do
can't
that. So
supplant. And actually, and one of the biggest things that was changed about this particular passing by both the last two acts in Washington, like at the end of December, and then this one recently, both of them forced the state to give us the money, because some states weren't very willing to give the local agencies the money. Now they said, you must give them 90% of the money. You got 10% discretionary, but really only 2% is discretionary of that for the state. The other 8% is, you have to give this out to the other schools, you just gotta figure a way to do it.
Yeah, I just don't
So
want
they're
tax-
making sure that this money gets to the schools
Right.
and not just to the capital.
I just didn't want our taxpayers to think, you know, we're just trying to spend money instead of
Oh.
helping out with the tax levy. This money has to be used for other
We have to be
purposes.
very judicious about this as we
Yeah.
move forward.
Okay, if there's no other questions on that, we're going to move on to the Dutchess County Boces Board of Elections. Okay, so for the first time and maybe ever, there are more candidates running for the Boces Board than there are slots. So there's 3 positions open, and there are 5 people running. So everybody in their packet has been able to look at the information that has been sent to us, and so we need to come to consensus. So are we handing in like paper, or we just,
You're going to mark it on
we're gonna
the
mark it
paper
on it,
ballot.
so we're gonna mark
No
it on-
names, and then Whitney will
Okay.
tally. We have a whiteboard here, and Whitney will tally. Then once we have that, the board makes a decision as a board, not as individual board members.
So you can vote for 1, 2, or 3 candidates.
And we're not
As you-
ranking them, right? Just,
Just voting,
X,
but you
yeah.
cannot vote for more than 3 candidates. Any questions? Mark?
I just have a comment. So there's 2 candidates from the Wappinger Board. From
Yes.
Wappinger School District, you can only put one of them. You can only vote for one of them.
Thank you, Mark.
Does it list the districts on there?
It does. Is there anybody questions about what we're doing now, or how it's, anything else? Okay, so go ahead and mark your ballots, and then Whitney will collect them. Or Christine will come and collect
Well,
them.
we need an auditor to do this, right?
yeah, would you?
Shuffle them up.
They don't- I think they have names on them. Just like election day, Whitney.
It's practice, good practice.
Okay. Yep. So according to our board, we have 3 candidates with a majority of the board, if I'm reading right, yes? So is everybody good nominations for those 3 candidates? That's the way it played out? Okay. So I don't know if the camera reads that, so we're putting Marie Johnson, Rick Keller Coffey, and Karen Smythe. Okay, thanks everybody for that, and thanks for the candidates to run for the Boces board. Appreciate having extra people come out. All right, moving on to good news. Anyone have some good news they want to share? Mark?
I just want to, reiterate that it's really great news that our students are coming back to school. It's been a long time coming, and I'm really glad that within the next short period of time, we're going to have everybody in school.
Yes. Any other good news?
Just say the list for National Honor Society came out, and Rhinebeck had 22 inductees, and it'll be a ceremony next week sometime, which I think is great.
Nice.
An in-person ceremony.
In-person
too.
ceremony.
Not virtual.
How is the ceremony
It's
being
going to be
taken?
an
I was looking-
in-person
I
ceremony.
was looking
In
forward to
person,
it being
great.
outside. I don't know. Now it's back in the auditorium.
Oh,
Okay,
that's
cool.
nice.
That's really good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
It'll be our first in-person ceremony. in quite a while. That's
Yeah.
nice. Any other good news? Okay. So any old business? Nobody? Another opportunity for public comment? Seeing none. Any other? Okay, we're going to move on to our action items. Can I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following consent items?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor? That motion passes. Motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept with regret the resignation of Courtney Green from the position of BMS English teacher effective at the close of business on June 25th, 2021.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? We'd certainly be sad to see her go. All those in favor? Motion passes. Motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept with regret the resignation of Edward Lackey from the position of Rhinebeck High School English teacher effective at the close of business on June 25th, 2021.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Same, we will miss them both. All those in favor? Okay. Motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a grant award in the amount of $2,800 from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation in support of Week of Discovery of BMS 7th grade team and students.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Of course, we thank the Science Foundation for their generous donation. All those in favor? Okay. Motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to adopt the following resolution. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education hereby adopts the proposed budget for the 2021-22 school year in the amount of $35,380,864 and authorizes that the following proposition to be placed on the ballot at the annual meeting on May 18th, 2021. Shall the Board of Education of the Rhinebeck Central School District be authorized to expend the sums of money which will be required for school district purposes for the 2021-22 school year in the amount of $35,380,864 and to levy the necessary tax thereof.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Thank you, Tom and Albert, for all your work on the budget this year. And all those in favor? That motion passes. And motion to move to executive session to discuss for the purpose of negotiation.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
And thank you to Steve Boucher
Oh, no,
for making
thank-
live streaming possible.